Good evening. I'm Nova Blake, and this is your complete political briefing for Monday, April 13th, 2026. Tonight, the Iran peace talks in Islamabad collapse without a deal, and the United States Navy prepares to blockade Iranian ports. Let's get into it, starting with the top stories from across the American political landscape. The most consequential weekend of American diplomacy in decades has ended in failure. Vice President JD Vance led a high-level United States delegation, including Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, to Islamabad, Pakistan, for face-to-face talks with senior Iranian officials, including Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. On Sunday, April 12th, Vance departed Pakistan without a deal, saying at a press conference that Iran had, in his words, chosen not to accept American terms, and that the failure was far worse news for Tehran than for Washington. The collapse of the talks sets the stage for an escalation in pressure that could further destabilize the fragile two-week ceasefire announced just days ago. Following the breakdown of the Islamabad negotiations, President Trump announced that the United States Navy will impose a full naval blockade on Iranian ports, set to begin Monday, April 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The blockade will apply only to vessels traveling to and from Iran, and Tehran has already vowed to retaliate against any American military vessels entering the strait. Oil prices immediately responded to the news, with Brent crude topping $100 a barrel on Sunday, up 8% in a single session, as markets absorb the threat of further disruption to global energy supplies. The average price of a gallon of regular gasoline in the United States stands at $4.12 as of this weekend. The two-week ceasefire that President Trump announced on April 8th between the United States and Iran has shown severe strain almost from the moment it was declared. Despite the agreement requiring Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping, only a handful of vessels have transited the waterway since the truce began, a virtual standstill compared to the 130 to 160 ships that passed through daily before the war. Iran has cited unresolved issues, including a ceasefire in Lebanon and the release of frozen Iranian assets as preconditions before full negotiations could begin. President Trump publicly accused Iran of doing what he called a very poor job, and even a dishonorable job, of living up to its ceasefire commitments. Representative Eric Swalwell of California, who had been the front-running Democratic candidate in the state's governor's race, is facing the collapse of his campaign following sexual assault allegations published by the San Francisco Chronicle and confirmed by additional reporting from multiple outlets. A former staffer alleged that Swalwell sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions in 2019 and 2024 when she was too intoxicated to consent. Swalwell has denied all allegations as absolutely false. On Sunday, April 12th, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office confirmed it has opened a criminal investigation. The congressman has refused to withdraw from the race. The Democratic Party's political crisis in California deepened sharply over the weekend. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, California Senators Adam Schiff and Ruben Gallego, and the congressman's own campaign co-chair Representative Jimmy Gomez all withdrew their support and demanded he exit the race. All 21 of Swalwell's endorsements from fellow Democratic members of Congress were pulled within 24 hours of the initial reporting. Republican Representative Anna Paulina Luna of Florida announced plans to force an expulsion vote on the House floor this week if Swalwell does not resign. With California's June 2nd jungle primary just weeks away, the race to replace outgoing Governor Gavin Newsom is now in chaos. The Consumer Price Index report for March 2026, released Friday, April 10th, revealed the largest single-month spike in inflation in nearly 4 years, driven almost entirely by the Iran war's impact on gasoline. The overall Consumer Price Index, or CPI, rose 3.3% over the prior 12 months, up sharply from 2.4% in February. On a monthly basis, prices rose 0.9% in March, the steepest monthly jump since 2022. Retail gasoline prices surged 21.2% in a single month, the largest such increase recorded since 1967, pushing the national average to $4.12 per gallon. Economists are warning that inflationary pressure from the war will continue to build through April, even if energy prices stabilize. The Board of Immigration Appeals issued a final administrative removal order against Mahmoud Khalil on April 9th, denying the Palestinian activist's bid to dismiss his deportation case. Khalil, a former Columbia University graduate student who became the most prominent target of the Trump administration's crackdown on pro-Palestinian campus activism, has been fighting deportation since his arrest by Immigration and Customs Enforcement in March 2025. A federal injunction in a separate habeas corpus case in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals still blocks his actual removal, and his attorneys say the case will now be appealed to the Fifth Circuit. The decision represents the final administrative ruling in the immigration system, with further legal challenges now moving exclusively through federal courts. First Lady Melania Trump made a rare and extraordinary public statement at the White House on Thursday, April 9th, forcefully denying any personal ties to the late convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Reading from a prepared statement in the grand foyer of the White House, the First Lady stated she had never had a relationship with Epstein, that he did not introduce her to President Trump, and that she had no knowledge of his crimes. She also called on Congress to hold public hearings in which Epstein's surviving victims could testify under oath. House Oversight Committee. Democrats immediately endorsed the call for hearings, and Republican Representative James Comer of Kentucky, the committee chair, indicated the committee would move forward on Epstein victim testimony. NASA's Artemis II mission concluded successfully on Friday, April 10th, when the four-person crew splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego after a historic 10-day journey around the moon. The crew, 3 American astronauts and 1 Canadian, traveled a maximum distance of 252,756 miles from Earth, breaking the record set by the Apollo 13 mission in 1970. Recovery teams extracted the crew from the Orion capsule within 2 hours of splashdown and flew them by helicopter to the USS John P. Murtha for medical checks. The mission marked the first time human beings had traveled to the moon's vicinity in more than 50 years and gathered critical data for a future crewed landing on the lunar South Pole. Congress is facing a major new investigation into the political prediction market platform Polymarket, following what investigators describe as a pattern of suspicious, well-timed trading activity before major geopolitical events. Calls are intensifying inside Congress for a formal inquiry after anonymous traders were found to have made strategic bets on the Iran war and related events hours before public announcements confirmed those outcomes. Critics have raised questions about whether those traders had access to government or classified information, a practice that would constitute insider trading or a national security breach. The investigation is still in early stages, but multiple members of both parties have called for an immediate review of the platform's operations. Now, turning to Washington and the latest actions from the current administration. Here are 10 significant developments from the administration this week. President Trump announced on Sunday, April 12th, that the United States military will impose a naval blockade on Iranian ports beginning Monday morning, following the failure of the Islamabad peace talks. The blockade will restrict ships traveling to and from Iranian territory and represents a significant escalation of military and economic pressure. Administration officials framed the blockade as a consequence of Iran's failure to comply with the ceasefire's core requirement, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to international commerce. The announcement sent oil prices above $100 a barrel within hours and prompted immediate threats of retaliation from Tehran. The administration's 2-week ceasefire with Iran, announced on April 8th by President Trump, who called it a big day for world peace, has produced minimal results in its first days. The Strait of Hormuz, the reopening of which was the central American condition for the ceasefire, has seen only a trickle of vessel traffic. The United States Navy has been conducting mine-clearing operations in the strait after Iran reportedly lost track of mines it planted in the waterway during the war. More than 600 vessels remain stuck in the Middle East Gulf region, and shipping intelligence firm Lloyd's List estimated it would take more than 10 days just to clear the backlog, even if traffic returned immediately to pre-war levels. Vice President JD Vance, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner traveled to Islamabad, Pakistan on April 11th for high-stakes in-person negotiations with the Iranian delegation, the highest-level direct talks between the United States and Iran since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The talks stalled on two core issues: Iran's demand for the right to continue uranium enrichment for peaceful purposes, and its insistence on maintaining sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Vance left Islamabad on Sunday and told reporters the United States had not reached an agreement and that the failure was, in his words, bad news for Iran much more than for the United States. March's Consumer Price Index report, released Friday, April 10th, delivered the largest monthly inflation shock in nearly 4 years, with energy prices surging 10.9% in the month of March alone as a direct consequence of the Iran war and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The annual inflation rate climbed to 3.3%, the highest since May of 2024, and well above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. The White House is under significant political pressure as a result, with economists warning that inflationary effects from the war will take several months to unwind, even if the ceasefire holds and shipping lanes fully reopen. The administration pressed forward with its effort to deport Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil this week after the Board of Immigration Appeals issued a final administrative removal order on April 9th. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's formal determination that Khalil's presence in the United States poses a foreign policy risk remains the legal basis for the deportation effort. A federal injunction in the Third Circuit continues to block actual removal while the habeas corpus case proceeds. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, said it will appeal the Immigration Board's ruling to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Following First Lady Melania Trump's call for a congressional hearing for Jeffrey Epstein's surviving victims, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer announced the committee will hold hearings featuring Epstein victims testifying under oath. Bill Gates is scheduled to appear before the committee in June as part of the broader Epstein investigation, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has been scheduled for a deposition in May. Former Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was fired in April, has been ordered to testify before the committee, but the Department of Justice has moved to delay or block her appearance, citing transition complications. The administration's naval forces conducted the first transit of American guided missile destroyers through the Strait of Hormuz since the start of the Iran war on Saturday, April 11th, a deliberate show of force intended to assert freedom of navigation in the contested waterway. 2 United States Navy destroyers, the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. and the USS Michael Murphy, successfully completed the passage. Iranian state television claimed Iranian forces issued a warning that the vessels would be attacked if they continued, though the ships completed their transit without incident. The administration characterized the passage as the beginning of a new era of free commerce in the Strait. The White House is pressing Congress to hold an Iran war funding vote as quickly as possible, with the Pentagon's separate $200 billion supplemental funding request intended to cover the costs of the ongoing military campaign and replenish expended munitions, still pending on Capitol Hill. Senate Democrats, including Virginia Senator Mark Warner, signaled they may withhold support for additional Iran war appropriations absent a formal congressional debate and vote on the conflict's legal authorization. Some Republicans have also privately raised concerns about the constitutional basis for the war without a formal declaration from Congress. The administration moved to escalate economic pressure on Iran through financial sanctions this week, adding new designations against Iranian entities involved in financing proxy militia operations in Iraq and across the Middle East. Iraqi-backed militia groups, supported by Iran, have continued attacking American diplomatic facilities in the region during the ceasefire period, drawing a formal diplomatic warning from Washington to Baghdad. The White House told Iraqi officials that Baghdad bears responsibility for attacks by Iranian-linked militia groups operating on its territory. The administration is defending its executive order restricting mail-in voting in federal courts this week, as multiple lawsuits filed by Democratic attorneys general and civil rights organizations advanced in jurisdictions across the country. A federal judge in the District of Columbia heard arguments Monday in one of the first major challenges to the order, which directs the United States Postal Service to assign tracking barcodes to mail ballot envelopes and requires states to cross-reference federal databases to purge ineligible voter registrations. Legal experts on both sides expect the case to reach the Supreme Court before the November midterm elections. That's your full briefing for Monday, April 13th, 2026. I'm Nova Blake. Stay informed, stay ahead. We'll see you next time.